Yeah, I heard that too.
All right. So in any case, what I'm going to talk to you about is a little bit of my journey. And the theme here is, if this introverted guy can do it, then you can do it. And I'll explain how I built networking into something that fed my job search and didn't drain me. Doing applications, I find most people I talk to network, it's a draining activity. So how do you build in things during the day in, day out, to actually be motivated and to feel good during a job search? Typically is a pretty difficult time to feel good. So I think one of the biggest things that changed my direction in job search was just a conversation I had with Mark Lauterbach. He was presenting to LPN at the time and just talking about what is the number one thing people struggle with in their job search. And we were a room filled with half-hearted people saying things like applications and interviews and all the typical things you'd say. And the number one thing consistently for people is confidence. It's very little to do with the actual, gears of networking. It's just how we feel about ourselves. And that can have a pretty big impact on those applications, on those interviews, on everything, on just even like the daily motivation to get things done. So this is how you turn networking, something I really didn't want to do, something I hated, and it became the fuel that drove my job search. Not just help me meet people, help me find jobs, but actually help me to feel ready, feel confident, and feel more like myself. So I call it somehow networking didn't kill me. And what I like to talk about before we get too far into it is just the trust level in the United States. So if you actually look at, basically, this has been a survey that's been done for some 40 years now or more, where they've just asked people, do you think most people can be trusted? And that used to be, close to 50%. And people said, yeah, most people can be trusted. And we've just gone further and further down. And this data is, almost 10 years old now. There's probably a more updated graph than this. I think this came out in 2016. But we're sitting at 30%. There's nothing that tells me that this number has gotten any higher. And the reason that matters is, most of the time when it comes to finding a job, if somebody can trust you, then you're much more likely to get the job. If you're trustworthy, if you're credible. And one of the great ways to get somebody to trust you is to be referred to them. And oftentimes that can be a fruit of networking, but to me, it's really not the point of networking. But I do think it's important context. Oh, thanks. I'm clicking link. There we go.
Yeah, Mitchell, I'm guessing that number is probably down around 22%, given what's happened, the continued decline of trust.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think one of the key things here for me, I had a teacher in high school that shared this quote with me at one point. I have never read a single thing by Charlie Tremendous Jones. I don't know, he's a motivational speaker or something like that, once upon a time. And it's just simply, you'll be the same person you are in 5 years today, except for the people you meet and the books that you read. And I like to read books, but, I found, particularly as I became, a working adult in a career, I spent less and less time meeting new people. Just didn't really have a strong desire for it. But I just want to share how networking was something I didn't realize had always been part of my career, and I never really thought about it. And this is every single job I've ever had. I worked as a dishwasher at Casa Sanchez, got that job because my brother used to work there. Got a job in a mailing center because my friend's girlfriend worked there. Got a job landscaping because I had a bunch of people I knew who worked there. Got a job in an auto body shop because it was my friend's dad's auto body shop. Got a job at the business school at my college because I went to a class and really hit it off with the instructor. Got a job at a country club because I had friends that worked there. Got a job at Enterprise Rent-A-Car because I really networked and spent a lot of time with one of the recruiters through a club I was involved with. Same thing with Northwestern Mutual. Then in my career, doesn't like me clicking for some reason, I worked at Sercom International for 8 years. I got that job because I knew somebody that knew the CFO. Got the job at Alpen because I knew somebody that directed me where I could find the job. Angel.co, a website for startups and startup jobs. And then I worked at another startup in 2020 called Innovate, and I got that job because of somebody from LPN. His name is Jay. He knew the people, and he introduced me. I had one conversation with them, and they're like, "We got to hire this guy." Softy, on my current job, is the first job I did not know anybody that referred me in any way. And it was a long process. I interviewed probably about 2-3 months. So anyway, just a little bit about my story. When I moved to Colorado, I had been working for Sericom International. I was getting close to my 8th year, and I had moved to the state. I had worked from home for a year. I hadn't really met a lot of people. I made a strategic exit from that company. I had 3 months severance and no network. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I had the tech industry, with lots of jobs, but they looked at like, "Oh, you're doing translation and localization services. Like, what does that have to do with tech?" So I had a barrier to overcome there. And within 3 months, probably shorter than that, I had become a power networker. And so I started having a lot of people introduced to me. So how did I go from 0 to 100 so quickly? I think where this really starts, and I just like to take a moment to say this, simply put, you are enough exactly as you are. You don't have to be somebody. You don't have to have something you bring to the table. You have worth. You are worthy of meeting with people. And I'll tell you about my first networking meeting I had. So with this great guy, his name's Stefan Gessler, and Stefan invited me out for coffee. I was like, "Oh, this makes sense. My coach is telling me to do this. The networking groups I go to are telling me to do this. This seems like it's a really good, important thing to do." And I've been with this company 8 years, had a lot of my identity tied up in work, and I was no longer there. And I left that job just feeling drained and burnt out and scared and not confident in myself. And so I had started that networking journey, and I was half-hearted because I didn't know if I wanted to go back to an environment like that. Of course, the environments I found had been nothing like that. But it was all I really knew. And I think a lot of us, when we leave a job, we think, especially we've been there for a while, it's all miserable, or it's all going to end in some way that's unpleasant. And look, here I don't have a job. Something about me is not worth. And so my first step along this journey, I mentioned it being pointed out to me that the number one thing people struggle with in their job search is confidence. But this is the real thing that set it all in motion for me. And what it was a moment of vulnerability. And I think that's really the key to any job search. It starts with being honest with ourselves, not being hard on ourselves, but being able to be honest. So Stefan asked me one question. He said, "Mitchell, what do you think your biggest obstacle in your job search is?" And I paused and I thought about it. And I said something I just felt kind of terrified about saying it. But I decided I didn't have time to waste. And I was just going to be really honest. And I said, "Stefan, I think my biggest obstacle in my job search is me. Because if I got up every day and I fully applied myself, I'd probably be doing a lot more, and I'd be feeling better about myself doing it." And Stefan did just the perfect thing in that situation, and he just took it in and listened. He wasn't trying to give me advice. He wasn't trying to tell me what to do, but it was, safe to just share what my biggest struggle was. And I think that's the importance of groups like BoulderNet or Longs Peak Net, the 905, because they're kind of safe places to be unemployed and not be scolded or ridiculed or anything like that. Everybody has their own pace. Everybody has the stuff that they're working through. And usually unemployment is a time where, we either work through some stuff with ourselves or we luck into a job. For me, I had to work through some stuff with myself. I had to confront that there's a reason I didn't want to network. A couple years after I began my networking journey, I realized I probably had some kind of social anxiety because, the idea of meeting with people and talking with them, that first meeting with Stefan was so important because I felt like a burden lift, and I felt so free when I could just be honest with myself, but with another person who was dealing with many of the same struggles that I was. And so I think it starts with recognizing you are enough and you are worthy of being able to just share what's going on with you with somebody who's willing to pay it forward. And I think that's the really, really key thing, is that in all of my networking and meeting many hundreds of people, when I reached out to others and asked if they were willing to get coffee or willing to chat on Zoom, not a single person was ever rude to me. Not a single person ever put me down or rejected me. In every case, the only people that replied to my request for networking were people who were willing to pay it forward, who were willing to be helpful, or at least willing to just listen to see if they could be helpful. Because that's a thing with networking. If you think you're going to be able to identify the people who are going to be helpful, you're wrong. It takes quantity to find quality in networking. So if you think you're going to enjoy it because you're just going to pick the right people and they're going to help you and you're going to get that help right away, all you're going to be is disappointed. But for me, I realized if I could network and I could just fill up my schedule, and what I would do is I would go into the BoulderNet LinkedIn group or the LPN LinkedIn group. I would go through all the group members line by line. I would open a new tab for anybody that even looked remotely interesting. Did they work somewhere cool? Did I like their title? Was it in marketing? Was it in sales? Was it in product? Some things kind of adjacent to where I work. And then I just asked each one of them, hey, I see you're an LPN alumni. Would you be willing to get together? I had so many people that just said, yeah. And then all of a sudden, my empty schedule of unemployment filled with days wasted and days spent dragging myself through a few applications became filled with people who wanted to give me their time. And I spent so much time talking with people that by the time I actually got some interviews, it just felt like riding a bike. I'd been spending all this time practicing, just sharing a little bit of my story with people, being myself, not trying to wear a mask and put on some front, that by the time I was interviewing, I could just be myself. And I came off very authentic, very genuine, just aligned. My emotional, mental, physical state was aligned. If any one of those things are misaligned, it comes off like you're lying or you're untrustworthy. So networking was this great practice for everything else that was important in my job search. I found things like strength finders, which helped me to identify what my key strengths were, did a workshop on it, built out an elevator pitch for myself, started seeing that even if I felt like a failure on some level because I left this job in this long career I'd built 8 years at a company, I still had real strengths, and not everybody had my strengths. And so I could articulate those strengths and work backwards from, this is what you want me to do on the job. Well, these are my strengths and this is how it fit in. Oh, such a confidence booster. And then I could express that in few words to the people I met with. So they knew exactly what I was looking for. I eventually, I made a plan, identified what I wanted to do. And these are my strengths. This is what I do. Just tremendous. But without that networking piece, I wouldn't have found Strength Finders. I wouldn't have found Angel.co. I wouldn't have found great people along the way who were willing to introduce me to other people. And I wouldn't have had that daily feed of people making me feel important because they're willing to give me their time. And that's why networking is really a process. It's not, an event you can predict or expect a certain outcome. For me, it was about filling up my schedule, giving myself something to do, giving myself energy, because I am not faking it with these people. I am being myself. And that doesn't require a lot of energy. Being myself, that's easy. So that was the big part of my networking journey, and a big part of why I became much more comfortable opening up with others in general in my life. Eventually, this was kind of a first step in really getting in touch with my own emotions. Networking did a lot of things for me, but I was in my way. And as soon as I admitted that, the rest of the doors opened up. So we'll hop onto questions here in a minute. I just want to express that human connections are really magical. It's really, really wonderful, because I found that as I would open up to somebody else, they would share back with me. And usually that started with just a little bit about our careers. Then maybe it'd be a little bit about the struggles we'd had in our career or our job search. And with the right person, because we were being vulnerable with each other, I would find people that were willing to be vulnerable back with me. And I'd share, if it just seemed right, I'd share a little bit more and a little bit more about, this is why I think I got to where I was. And, people would tell me their life stories eventually. And I made real friends, real honest to goodness friends, people I'm still in touch with today. And it just never would have happened if we never met. And it never would have happened if I tried to just put on a front and, I am a marketing director and this is just what I want to do. And, I don't know. This thing's may be true, but it's not all who I am. In any case, I'm not going to tie. So we've got time for questions. I do want to say LinkedIn is a great resource. Another place where I've met people are Slack communities. So you can Google this and find out if you've got an area where you do work. There are a lot of Slack communities around marketing, and I've met plenty of people through there. Some of them even have like their own dedicated marketing channel. But both great places. The easiest way to reach out to people is to have something in common. So if you're both part of a networking group, that's a no-brainer. I also had quite a bit of luck just reaching out to alumni. Hey, I see you're a University of Arizona alumni. You live in Colorado, want to chat? Pretty much reached out to every U of A alumni in the state of Colorado at one point during a second job search I had in 2019. I had two kind of back-to-back, 2017 and 2019. Those are the main things I wanted to cover. I'll just end on this. The most important step a person can take, it's not even the first one. Most important step is always the next one. And networking is a way to give yourself steps, to always be taking the next step, because you're not waiting for that perfect job to come out and the application to open up. You're not waiting to hear back from anybody. You're just filling up your own schedule. That puts you in control. Thanks.
Thank you. Can you talk us through, please, a little bit of the how-tos? When you reached out to people in BoulderNet and LongSpeakNet, what was the nature of the conversation? What were you asking for?
I found that networking meetings are just two people sharing their story. And, I often didn't ask for anything. Eventually I'd ask, do you know anybody else who'd be interesting or great person to talk to? Not really a whole lot of qualifiers there, just who's a great person, because I just want to meet great people. Because I don't know who they know, what they know, etc. And I think networking, having high standards in networking just means about great people. It doesn't mean about what are they going to do for me. And if you're concerned about what you're going to do for me, you're going to have a bad time. I would also, particularly if I was on networking, well, anybody I'd network with, I'd ask them what they're looking for. And if there was anything I could offer, I'd try to offer it. So at first that's just like, have you heard of this networking group? Have you heard of this website? Have you heard of this or that kind of thing? And eventually it was, you should talk to this person, because I'd met so many people. I could introduce people to each other. And, that's why networking is a virtuous cycle, because the more I did it, the more I could independently bring value to somebody else, which felt good. It's not the reason I was there, and they had no expectation for that. In fact, one person put it to me best: Mitchell, there's nothing you can do to pay me back for our time. The only reason I'm meeting with you is because somebody else helped me and I couldn't do anything for them. I'm just paying it forward.
Yeah. And one more time, everyone that you talked to was willing to schedule a time with you, was open and receptive.
I mean, the worst that I got was people just didn't respond. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people are just working, or they don't have time, or whatever. And if you give me a second, I can even bring up some old LinkedIn messages and just show you what my outreach looked like.
That would be good, Mitchell. I wanted to add, because you said a couple things, I want to make sure that people understand. You cast a broad net. You didn't care. You weren't looking for people just in marketing. It was people to talk to. And you mentioned a concept that I call super connectors, right? Those people that know a bunch of people. So you're broadening your network, but you're also deepening it if you found someone in a target company or in your industry. And one of the things I challenged Mitchell to do, and I coached Mitchell through his first job search. I guess it's 3 now in the last couple of years. Yeah. But I challenged him. I said, hey, find the top 50 business-to-business marketers in the U.S. and reach out to them. That's a pretty daunting task, right? Because these are people identified as what I call the Yodas, or experts. But he did it. Google top 50 marketers. The list came up, and Mitchell reached out to him. Some responded, and he's developed a relationship. But when he was interviewing, he had to do a 90-day plan, and Mitchell sent that to those marketers and said, "Give me feedback." So he had confidence that leading peers in the industry gave him feedback. But also, what Mitchell found out was we all have a bit of that imposter syndrome. When he's talking to these experts, Mitchell's like, "Hey, I know as much as they do. Hey, I'm lining up. I really am better than I thought I was, right?" And so, but anytime you have conversations, it's going to be uplifting. And Mitchell, when he talked in person at LPN, he came up to every table before the meeting and introduced himself and said, "How can I help you?" And that virtuous help first, you don't see that often. What everyone has on this call, because you're all talking to a lot of people, is what you can bring to the people you're talking to is, hey, I'm networking with a lot of people. What would you like to learn about? Or what kind of person would you like to meet? And you might be in marketing and they say, "Yeah, I want to learn about Agile Scrum development. Do you know an expert?" Well, if you don't, you go find one in your network, you make that connections. I always think of networking as that game as kids where we turned over cards, match 2 elephants, match 2 donkeys. I match people, right? And I find someone that, hey, it might be 2 months ago, I introduce them to someone because I write down and I search for people that I'm helping. It's a two-way street. I do about 300 independent networking meetings a year outside of what I'm doing to help job seekers. I do it every week. And I'm reaching to people all across the world. It's broadened my horizon. It's broadened my network and my understanding of the world. And I'm an introvert as much as people think I'm an extrovert.
Yeah.
But the give and the get don't happen at the same time necessarily. Like Mitchell said, there's nothing you can do to help that person. But let's say 3 months later, someone mentions something and you find something, pay it back and share that. And don't overthink it. And Tuesday, Gordon asked a question. I've never had anyone tell me I'm stupid after doing thousands of networking meetings. Gordon agreed. No one's told Gordon he's stupid. Has anyone been told they're stupid in a networking meeting for setting that up and talking? No. Why do we fear it like sharks?
You're not stupid, you're brilliant.
Yeah, I'm a legend in my own mind. Mm.
Mitchell's looking for that email.
Yeah. What other questions do y'all have?
Mitchell, can you tell more about angel.co?
Well, sure. Angel.co is a website where startups from, 5 people to 2,000 people will post jobs, and they've just got an easy application process. Just a little bit different process. It's a little bit like LinkedIn Jobs, but you just have like instant apply, and you're not uploading resumes. You just have your profile, and it just makes some things a lot easier.
Okay, thanks.
Talk about stimulating the conversations. What are good open-ended questions to get your subject talking?
I think just asking about their career and what's their story. I've never found dead air in networking meetings.
Wonderful.
I just don't think that's an issue. Someone says, yeah, I'll meet with you. You're looking for a job, whatever, man, let's just chat. And then sit down with you and be like, so I don't know. I've just never had a dull moment in terms of that.
Were you ready with questions?
I don't think I ever really prepared questions for people.
Didn't prepare, okay.
No. And it's just, what's it like at your company? Here's what I'm looking for. Are you looking for anything? What's your story? How'd you get to where you are? Again, networking is really just about 2 people sharing their stories. And if someone's willing to share their story with you, they're gonna, they could talk for an hour about it. I guess I got a lot of my messages are archived and seem to be hard to access. But let me just, I can show you some people that have maybe reached out to me, but I look at some conversations and I'm like, I know I reached out to you first, but it's all archived. So it's kind of a bummer that it disappears after a while. Let me look for 905.
One thing that can be helpful as you're going back and forth to set up a time, Calendly, CALENDLY.com. They have a free scheduling software where it'll look at your calendar and it'll blank out those areas. So you can send them a link rather than, hey, you're available next Wednesday at 5 or Thursday at 2. No, what are you available? It just makes it easy because you can send out the link. They can click on it and get on your calendar. So I'll put that, they have a free account where you can set up meetings. I have a paid account because of my coaching and consulting. It's a really easy way to make it easy for them to just jump in your calendar and schedule time. They don't see your activities, they just see your open time because it links to, which means you have to be using an electronic calendar, whether Google or Outlook, etc. But that's one way to ease the way to set up the time.
And I find if someone reaches out to me, I don't know, I learned this at a sales job. The most important thing that I do when I reach out to people is I just say, and I think, let me share that with me. But this is how I'd reach out. Look, I got his name wrong. I was copying and pasting. But it didn't matter. Greg and I have chatted multiple times. I'm a 905er looking to connect with marketing and product management professionals working in tech in Colorado. Would you be willing to connect over the phone or grab some coffee? Hoping to be a resource for you now or down the road. And we ended up meeting up together at a product meetup. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of these. A lot of people get back to me. The most important thing I do though is just say, are you available Tuesday at 10 or Thursday at 2? Or are you available at 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. on Wednesday or Friday? And I always pick like 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. because it's just it's not first thing in the morning. It's not right at lunchtime. It's not at the end of the day, but it's not right after lunch. And it's so much easier for people to say, oh, no, those times won't work, but this will work. When I get messages where it's like, so when are you available to meet? Like, you want me to do all the work? Like, I'm like inwardly like, oh, come on, that's lame, dude. So just throwing out times, because it just comes from this fundamental human concept that people, when they have to think of something from nothing, that feels like a lot more work than if they're just editing something. So I encounter this all the time in my job, because if I want information from somebody, I will write a version of it and say, what would you change this to? Instead of saying, what would you say? Way easier to get responses from people. What other questions do you have? What do you struggle with in your job search?
Mitchell, what venues did you find most effective? I mean, in pre-COVID times, we used to talk to folks about, setting up coffee meets, but, for the last, year, 18 months, that's been a challenge. Did you find coffee meets to be most effective? Phone conversations? What venue did you find most effective? As an introvert, especially, getting started.
Yeah, so my job search in 2017, I loved being able to get out of the house and meet people at like a Starbucks. And I'd set up whole days where I'm like, okay, I've got like 2 or 3 people that are in Denver. This is going to be my Denver day. And I'd line up a few meetings in Denver, and great way to get out of the house. But I did job search during the pandemic. So at the beginning of the pandemic, beginning of 2020, I was still job searching. And then I continued to look for a job at that job. I found it was way easier to meet with people over Zoom. Just like, there's no travel. They're like, it's just, they're right there at their computer. And so yeah, it was a breeze, and I enjoyed it. I wasn't getting out of the house, so I didn't like that as much, because I think just getting out when you're unemployed, really helpful. So I'd have to, try to go on walks and things like that to build on that a little bit. But otherwise, Zoom video, people do it all day. So they're like, fine, sure, whatever, dude. Let's talk. It's a breeze.
Sure.
I don't have a question, but just an observation. Mitchell, it appears to me that you're pretty smart and or insightful. You seem to have a good feel for other people's needs and stuff. So I wonder where that came from.
Well, I am going to practice what I preach here and be vulnerable with you. I spent most of my time growing up in a house filled with very angry and addicted people. And so I had to be constantly on the lookout, walking on eggshells all the time, and try to understand other people's needs so that I didn't set them off, so that it wasn't my fault they got angry, et cetera, the stuff that kids in that situation do. And that really is what fed into my social anxiety, if that's indeed what I had, because I was always trying to act in a certain way, and people were fundamentally a threat to me, because in my family of origin, the people closest to me were threatening. So that's where some of that comes from. I think in terms of where I am now, I think it's having an empty emotional garbage can, no longer stuffing my emotions, but when they come up, able to lean into them instead of avoiding them. And that woke something in me. And I just call it empathy. But once I could feel my own feelings, it was a lot easier to imagine how somebody else feels.
And Mitchell, if I could add, we've known each other for how many years now? Is it?
Oh gosh, it's since 2017.
Yeah, God, we're going on 4 years. I've seen an evolution since Coach Mitchell became good friends, and we've been out socially, and I've seen an evolution, and I think one thing I saw is he was doing more networking and meeting more people. I saw his empathy grow and his emotional intelligence. Always an emotionally intelligent guy, but just practicing it and really, like you said earlier, being vulnerable and just getting out there. I've seen an evolution and improvement, which was great, and now is exceptional. So I've seen that in the 4 years we've known each other.
Yeah, but my networking went from sharing career stories to people telling me their life story when I realized one thing. And I still remember Mark's reaction to it, because he's like, yeah, Mitchell, you are a little different. I don't sense any nervous energy for you. And not everybody gets to have these, breakthrough moments. But for me, I just realized that nobody I met with was going to hurt me more than my family hurt me. And after that, I felt kind of invincible, and allowed me to open up more. And yeah, people were just, I don't know, it feels like magic when someone's willing to open up to you. And I don't know, you may know people that shared their life story with you and they're just like, oh gosh, why don't you just slow down? Because they just like emotionally dump. And it often comes out in the form of complaining. And I don't mean that, just people sharing parts of their life in a deep and meaningful and, I don't know, appropriate way. It's cool, the kind of conversations that networking can open up with the right person.
Do you consider yourself a pretty competent listener?
Sometimes.
The skill of listening related to networking. Give us some insights there.
Shut up.
Shut up. That's good.
I mean, it, in terms of listening, it's about having a real genuine interest. I think at one point in my life, I spent a lot of my time listening, thinking about what I wanted to say next. And that came from fundamentally the desire to control other people. And I had that desire to control other people because people didn't feel safe, and I felt more safe if I was in control, simply put. Letting go of that, it's a lot easier to just listen without any judgment or anything else, just genuinely curious. And I can't control what this person thinks or says, so I'm just going to enjoy what they do say.
But that's a problem with Americans in general. I mean, we're taught we're thinking about speaking, and I see that when I practice with interview skills, right? They're talking, they're thinking what they're going to say, and literally I'm just finishing asking the question, the answer is coming out, or I will ask the question a different way and they answer it wrong because they weren't listening, right? And we're trained to talk immediately because we're listening to speak, not listening to understand.
Yeah. Tammy, you got a question?
Hey, I do. Thank you. This was really helpful and valuable. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. My question is, I've been targeting and looking to find early stage startup companies. I don't really fit neatly into a particular role. I'm kind of this Jane of all trades. And I know the advice out there is, oh, you got to just pick something and go after it. But I'm kind of targeting this niche for the reason that at an early stage company, they need somebody and it's advantageous to wear many hats. So what's your opinion on that, given that it looks like since you were targeting the angel.co arena, that maybe you were also looking at the startup arena too, but I might have that wrong. But what's your thought on that?
Yeah. So I got really great advice from this guy, Ryan Severance. He was early employee at VictorOps and then went off and has started his own startup now. And the way that he put it is, look, it's fantastic that you have so many generalist skills and you can work across an organization like you do. And that's fantastic after you get hired. Usually when they're trying to hire somebody, they're looking for something very specific and they're focused on that when they're doing the hiring. So be their solution to that. And then everything else is this really big bonus that helps you stick. That's at least what I was told.
Okay, thank you.
For my job specifically at Alpin, they were looking for like a one-man marketing team. So the fact that I had a lot of experience in different areas of marketing, even though I'd been in leadership for a long time, that was the leap for them. Like, look, I'd led large marketing departments. But all of a sudden now, like, hey, we're tiny and we need a one-man marketing team. I'm able to speak to all these areas. I really brought it back to my Strength Finders results. I even pulled out a laminated like copy of my top 5 strengths. I said, look at the things you're trying to accomplish. Look at my strengths. You need someone to find a path forward. I can do that, with my strategic. You need someone to come up with lots of ideas and get creative and do that with a low budget. That's what my ideation is for. You need someone that's just focused on getting tons of things done while I'm motivated by checking things off my to-do list. It was a helpful part of the conversation.
Thank you.
Hey, Tammy, have you looked at Innisphere? Because they have the SAGE program where you volunteer your services. They're companies that are not yet through the, they're not yet approved to go through the process, but they're SAGE advisors that you can join based on what, your ability to serve the community. And then you get to work with really early stage startup companies. Obviously it's pro bono, but you're really getting embedded into Ecosphere. And Innisphere now has offices in Fort Collins, Boulder, and Denver.
And that's a great suggestion, and I've heard of it. And it's, I somewhat dismissed it because I felt like, well, I haven't had this experience before of being in an entrepreneurial environment. But frankly, after a couple of recent networking meetings, I realized that, I probably could be more helpful than I realized. Mm-hmm. So I will do that. Thank you.
Yeah, and Scott McClure, who co-leads LPN, he's actually one of the people that vets people for SAGE. So send me an email. I'll just do an introduction email for you and Scott.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Great question. Now we got some networking going.
It's called networking. Good job.
And the solution, everyone on the call could say, here's what I'm looking for. And we got a lot of brilliant minds here.
Yeah. What are the questions, struggles around networking? Yeah, Don?
Yeah, I have a technical question. Looks like you have a nice little logo there. Wonder how you got that.
I made it. I got some graphic design skills.
Oh, good. It looks nice.
Yeah.
And then I ran it by one of my graphic design friends, and he made it even better.
And Mitchell designed the LPN logo for us too.
Ah.
I should say redesigned.
Well, BoulderNet needs logo help. Not critical.
I have a question.
Yeah, Lauren.
Lauren, please.
No, Gordon, go ahead, and then I'll ask.
Okay. The concept of approaching this process, accepting that you can help this person. Talk about how often could you genuinely help them? You mentioned the timing is out of anybody's control, but would there be a percentage of people that you helped along this way?
I have no freaking clue.
Okay. That's an honest answer, sir. But did the idea that you couldn't help them inhibit your approaching them?
No, I think networking is not a good place to keep score. What was your question, Lauren?
I actually realized I have 3 questions, but I'll ask the first.
Go ahead.
Shoot your shot.
The first question is, do you maintain all those connections still?
Hell no.
Time, right?
No, yeah. So quite a few people keep in touch with, and I'll make some time for reaching out to people. And if they cross my mind, I just, instead of thinking, oh yeah, I haven't thought about them in a while, I just reach out and say, hey, you crossed my mind because of this. How are you? And that's just it. And the people that made a lasting impression for one reason or another, I think it makes it more authentic when I do it, because it's not just, hey, I've got you in my little Excel sheet and it's been 6 months. And so I'm reaching out, and the people that I really connected with in a bigger way, easy to stay in touch.
Well, and that makes sense, not having that, and thank you for that, not having that, okay, this is my checklist, I'm gonna reach out now, but just that natural,
I do this because it feels good and I like it. As soon as I involve a spreadsheet, which I did a little bit in one job search, because I was just like, okay, I'm going to go through my whole network, and I wanted to have a little organization at one point, but as soon as it's work, I just won't do it. It's got to feel good.
So then when people reach out to you, you're generally open to those discussions.
Oh, absolutely. Kind of be an asshole if I wasn't.
Great point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and much in the same way, I'm just paying it forward.
And Lauren, before your third question, I'm gonna let you in on a secret. At least once a week, I've been doing this for 10 years. I take my cell phone, I just spin it like roulette. I just spin my phone, and I just stick my finger down, and I hit Dave Sanders. If they're important enough, they're in my cell phone. And Dave went through LPN and BoulderNet a couple years ago. I'm going to send Dave a text or an email and just say, hey, Dave, just thinking about you. How's things going? And people are shocked, right, when you get a text or an email or a LinkedIn message. But I do that usually multiple times a week. But I set this up 10 years ago. They do this about 10 years ago. And so if I reach out to you via text, you're in my phone, you'll be go, oh, now I understand Mark's secret. But I just spin the phone. But there's other people I keep in touch with because we developed a relationship. But I've had people I haven't talked to in 10 years that I reach out to, and it's like no time's passed. And we talk about what's going on. And sometimes, they need some help. But that's
Did you have a third question, Lauren?
I actually have two more, but they're more of a personal nature. So I'm going to set those aside for later if there's time.
Okay. Or you can shoot me a message on LinkedIn. All good.
Mitchell, I have another observation.
Yeah.
You seem to really enjoy being honest.
I guess.
Which I admire that. I kind of agree with that. It sets you free, I think.
Yeah, I think the important bit is being honest, but not being a jerk. A lot of honest people you just don't want to spend any time with, right?
Yeah. Lauren, I think you should go ahead with your other two questions.
All right, I will. Thank you, Don. So one of them is that in the language of what you wrote, and I did have a conversation about this, in the language that you used to describe this presentation, you used the word overcame.
Yeah.
And my impression of that was that overcame was a word that meant you had to change who you were, fix yourself kind of thing to fit.
Sure.
Can you tell me your thoughts on that word? Us, not me, us.
Well, let me turn that back around on you. In
Okay.
my discussion about my emotional journey and who I was and my big steps with Stefan and saying my biggest obstacle was myself. What about that indicates overcoming to you?
Oh, you mean overcoming those obstacles of within yourself.
Yeah.
And that actually ties into the third question because you and I share, it sounds like just to be honest and vulnerable in this setting, I'm in the heart of doing some work, a lot of work on that, that childhood trauma the impact on adulthood that I never, well, I've known about it, but I've never gotten like it to the heart of it. And that's what I'm doing. And at the same time, so I'm very raw, very vulnerable, but at the same time, I need to find a job. And so I'm in this place of, well, because I don't even feel like I can apply right now. I have been talking to a lot of people. I can say that I've reached out to a lot of people, and it's been fun to put myself out there in the context of, because I am a good listener. And so I put myself out there and say, hey, let's talk. I've been doing a lot more of that. But so I guess the question is, how do you take all of that and put it into the actual work of applying for a job?
I think being in touch with oneself and being one's true, authentic self, really critical to any human interaction. And so a really helpful group for me was adult children of alcoholics. Wasn't really the alcoholism as a young kid, but it was a pretty important group for me. And then that just came, that stretched into taking care of myself. So getting some exercise, talking to people, really important part of looking for a job is just self-care and being in that right headspace.
Thank you. And yes, that's part of the work I'm doing.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. Congrats to you too.
Lauren, if you haven't found it, have you spent much time with Boulder Workforce? I'm not sure what their status is with respect to COVID, but have you made it over to Boulder Workforce?
I got to jump, guys. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mitchell, very much.
Yeah.
Great job.
Thank you. Thanks, Mitch.
Take care.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thanks, Mitch.
Yes, I have discovered